I'm Christopher Breedlove. I'm an artist and a community builder. I really came into this work because what was exciting to me was even when I was young, I kind of like knew that I wanted things to change, and the thing that I thought was probably the biggest lever that we had was storytelling. And so I decided to study film and video because that was at that age for me kind of the most captivating story mechanism there was. And I really believed that people don't change their minds because of facts or opinions almost ever. But what happens is that we hear a really great story and then we can imagine ourselves in that story and then we can become the characters we want to be in that story. And so that was for me really kind of the driving movement in the early part of my life. And while I was trying to figure out how to be a filmmaker, I decided to jump on this gypsy school bus. I was 19 years old. I told these people I was going to make a documentary about them. I don't recommend it, but I lied about how old I was so that these people would let me on their bus. And I ended up spending 2.5 months traveling across the US in this kind of community school bus. And it taught me two great things, which one was actually a lot about who I didn't want to be. It was a rough and tumble life in this community. I would say that as I've built my own communities, I think one thing that I've really learned is I really like clear values and expectations, because I think that's one of the things that like helps communities thrive. And we didn't necessarily have that during that moment. But then when I was getting off, this guy named Darren said, "Hey, he felt like I'd really affected him on this trip. And so he said, I want to bring you to my favorite place in the world." And so he ended up bringing me to Burning Man. And, what's very funny is I was a 19-year-old kid. I'd heard of what Burning Man was. And Darren and I spent a week of him teaching me how to spin fire, not telling me that it gets cold, not telling me that I even need a ticket. And so we're like halfway through Reno, and he ends up putting me in a big duffel bag and he sneaks me in to Burning Man. And yeah, eventually, I get out of this bag and because it was so hot in there and I have this big gasp of air and I ended up in Black Rock City and it really blew my mind as a young man. And I think two things happened for me in that, which was one, there was this like deep feeling inside of myself that I was like, oh, I've made it in some sort of a way. I was like, I kind of knew that this like type of creativity existed and I all of a sudden was in it. Um, and then the second thing that happened was there was this really beautiful camp and it was full of visionary artists. And I was like, what is up with this place? And I found out that it was called Entheon Village. And I found out that a lot of the builders of Entheon Village were from Chicago, which is where I was going to school. And so the other thing that happened for me is I kind of fell into this community of people who were warehouse artists in Chicago. And so this then kind of became so much of my life. And so that's a very long intro to say, I now, 20 years or whatever it is later, because that was 2006. So yeah, 20 years. I now work for the Burning Man organization, which is why I always tell people at Burning Man, it's like, let's not be too mean to people who are trying to sneak in, who knows where they might end up. And, kind of in that story of having found this community at Burning Man, but going back to Chicago and really falling in with the crew there, I fell in love with this idea of the extended community. And I fell in love with the idea of how our communities that we find in festival circumstances can actually come back home and really affect change. Because, there's this thing that we have out at any event or transformational experience where we get all of this wonder and awe. And then we come back and we get kind of, I think, sometimes disappointed that the rest of the world doesn't feel like that all of the time. But we're the ones who've had the wonder and the awe. And so for me, it's been this big call to come back home and to build those experiences and to share those experiences with other people.
Borders is a grassroots organization that connects real-time challenges to real-world solutions, tackling problems by applying the ingenuity of our community.
Burners Without Borders started when a group of individuals left the Burning Man event in 2005 and decided to create a relief project in the wake of Hurricane Katrina.
Early Sunday morning, Katrina had built into a dangerous Category 5 hurricane barreling towards New Orleans.
In a really instinctual moment, the community rallied together and said, we have the skills to build Black Rock City. We have the skills that are transferable down in New Orleans. Burners Without Borders wasn't even a concept or a name yet. It was really kind of birthed from a moment of finding that the networks, the skills, and the experiences that we've taken from Burning Man mean something in these disaster zones.
Disaster is not somewhere out there, right? At this point, the question isn't if you're going to be impacted by disaster, it's when.
There was a 7.9 Richter earthquake that hit, devastating about 70 to 80% of Pisco, Peru, and Burners Without Borders decided, yeah, we want to support you guys.
While Burners Without Borders started with immediate disaster response, it has since evolved into a worldwide network of community groups doing community resilience work, civic engagement, and more are verging on regenerative projects that are trying to make a more positive world.
It's like a big mutual aid network. It's a communications platform. It's a mouthpiece for the burners that are passionate about civic impact. Burners Without Borders taps into something that feels very innate in all of us, which is a desire to help and create solutions.
By working on community projects together today, we're preparing ourselves and becoming more resilient for the problems we'll face tomorrow.
We're building upon that and looking at the systemic issues and the deeper ways that we can interface with the world and how we can have impact in those spaces.
We're thinking about how we can preempt some disaster that might strike our communities in the coming years and thinking about what kind of resilience we can build now among each other to be able to face whatever is coming next. We're here at the beautiful Fly Ranch.
Fly Ranch is a 4,000-acre property owned by Burning Man.
For us, Fly Ranch is a prototyping space. It's a testing ground for what can happen out in the world.
It's a year-round platform and initiative to look at creating regenerative culture out of the Burning Man event and community. We're doing everything from regenerative agriculture practices. We're taking all of the compost that's coming from our staff kitchen in Black Rock City. We're growing food out of that. We're bringing it back into the city. We've been tanning and prepping hides. We're learning about the indigenous plants and the wisdom of things that the land has to give to the inhabitants of it.
Regeneration, sustainability is something that has always been a core tenet for us.
Burners Without Borders Mobile Resource Unit Container represents our vision for providing resources for those who need it. Mobile Resource Unit Container has tools, has everything you need to build camp, to fix things, to make things work again. And that's what we want to do. We want to help empower people and let them solve their own problems.
This journey we've been on, from response to resilience to regeneration, isn't a linear one. Rather, it's an understanding and a lens that we can take to every single project that we do.
Esta entrevista es en la casita de Pony, hecha por ustedes mismos.
For the next decade, we're really looking at how we can build systems that circumvent and solve problems in new and creative ways.
We're going to continue to double down on the work that we've been doing, providing spaces and opportunities for this network to deepen in trust with one another is exactly what the future is asking of us.
En realidad tienen amor en trabajar, lo hacen con tanto entusiasmo.
Everybody belongs here. You don't have to be an expert to join this community. All you have to do is care about something and take action with the community around you. We do have these chapter groups and they're all over. And, I think that, Annie kind of says it in the video. I mean, what we're going to do is we're going to double down on what we've already been doing, but I think we're going to be even more targeted in how we do that. And so, our big goal is to continue to figure out how to find the people out there who are doing this work, connect them together, share the educational resources, because I think that's also a big thing. Like oftentimes we get inspired to do something and we don't necessarily know um, who else has tried something like that. And there's so many learnings our community already has. And so how do we connect those? And we really want to continue to figure out how to fund and educate our community in these things. So I think like while it's not like the most exciting edge of it, I think that's what we really need to do. And so we do these grant programs a couple of times a year. They're usually targeted in different regional areas, and it's super inspiring to see what people are doing. And like this last one we did in October, we decided to specifically target people who want to do, events that are more sustainable, who are using art. And so there's a guy who we funded who's building this whole deployable star shade system, which is going to create more ground coverage and have less setup than kind of some of the traditional kind of shade structures you see. And another group that is building out these, easy to recreate solar ground light path systems. And so, we're just trying to figure out the ways that we can really tap into people's creativity to help them build their dream, and then ideally to share again those stories and those templates. And I think that's kind of the overwhelming thing actually for us sometimes is there's so many cool stories of what people are doing. And I know sometimes I even like don't know which story to tell. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where we're going with all of this.
You're a visionary that sees this great potential in this time and need, right, for people to come together and to do something meaningful and to have fun while we're doing it.
Absolutely essential to have fun while we're doing it, because if we're going to build that better world that our hearts know is possible, if we're not having fun, first of all, I think we're going to burn out, and then second of all, I don't think we're going to be able to get all of the homies into the room that we need to make this happen. Because if we're going to do it, it means we're going to be probably understaffed and under resourced as we're building this world. And so we might as well have a really great time, because I think that's how we bring in the people. And then that's all of a sudden when we have these movements that are, sometimes I like saying like movements that are leaderful, not about leadership. Because if it's about one person leading, that's where, it can be very, very heavy. But if we have these leaderful movements, that's where it's way more fun. We need to be able to imagine where we want to go. Because if you don't know where you're going to go, you might end up there, but it's way less likely. And so, right, when you're talking about Regenera too, that was a big part of what we called for the theme last year at Burning Man, this idea of tomorrow, today, and kind of telling this story that the future has been taken over by these two monomyths, right? The tech-fueled utopia, where it's like, oh, tech just finally saves us, or the dystopian hellscape where none of us get out alive. And neither of those feel very real, but also they don't feel like we can participate in them. And so this third way, which, is Protopia, the tomorrow that is better than today, made real through our collective actions, but is never quite perfect. And that feels like a story we can be a part of. And again, it is, I think, the artists, it's the movies, it's the books, it's the paintings I looked at when I was young and also as an adult, but some of those, like, I don't even know what they were called. And they're like in my head of like kind of driving me forward into what that world might be. And then we've got these train stations, which I think that's also part of it. I'm seeing someone write, it's like the hub of information, but it's also the map of all of the train stations that you can visit along the way.
This community is that hub for so many different things. And I feel like this iteration of the Vision Train going forward is trying to really connect all of these organizations, like, hey, like, we're here, let's spread the word, where we can have this web, this weaving, this connection, like all these tracks to come in. Yeah.
Well, I think the question is like, do I see that happening here? I would say absolutely. And, I think one thing that I've thought a lot about that I think is like a correlation between like Burning Man and the Vision Train in this way is that there's this movement that we're all a part of that we don't really have a name for. And that's the hard part. So sometimes we call the movement Burning Man, or sometimes we call the movement Vision Train, but we're all like these tracks on this much, much larger movement. And it is these kind of projects that do this interconnection and this interstition, because again, the movement's really, really big in my experience, and it's global, and people who don't even know that it exists yet are already part of it, because they're living and they're breathing the culture. And so it's projects like this and so many others that are out there talking about it and bringing people in. And that, to me, again, kind of going back to the very, very beginning, is how we're going to create this more beautiful world, is by finding all the homies and creating a really great dance party while we build the village. And to call out just maybe like one last kind of value or principle, this idea, and this one definitely comes from Adrienne Marie Brown, of pleasure activism. I don't know if folks have talked about that, but Adrienne is a queer Black woman from Detroit, and she is awesome and she is radical. She also wrote Emergent Strategy, which is phenomenal for this moment. But she really makes the argument that for people who are being oppressed, the simple act of feeling pleasure in your body is its own act of revolution. And as we step into this really weird world that we're in, and these next couple of, in my opinion, decades that are probably just going to get weirder and weirder, I think we need to be kind to ourselves and remember that in some moments, simply feeling pleasure is going to be the act of revolution itself. And, that is part of why I continually have gone back to Burning Man. And I've told all the theme camp organizers this so many times, is that, they've been practicing building human systems, volunteer systems, comm systems, power systems, waste systems, and they have the best dance party while they're doing it. And like, that is going to be part of the revolution that brings in the people. It's got to feel good. Or I think we're doing it wrong. And so that's the kind of the indicator that I try and hold in my body through all of this work, is like, sometimes it's hard. I mean, actually, oftentimes it's hard. And I don't love every single moment that I'm doing it, but like, is it overall fun? Is it inspiring? Is it what makes me want to wake up? Then that's the revolution I want to be a part of.